it's also when I work with clients from a host or guest perspective, this is what is working. And here's the proof. And I could show you it's working because every one of my clients, you're a top globally ranked podcast now. Every single one of my clients have become top globally ranked podcasts within a year of us working together. Whether they start with me from day one and never having a podcast before and saying, hey, I have this idea and want to start my podcast, and within the month, can we do it? The quickest turnaround I've done, fun fact, is 2 weeks. That was a little bit of stressor because it was also right before, like literally they signed right before Thanksgiving, and they were like, the first week of December, we want to launch. And I'm like, oh, okay. I know I'm making this impact, but I want to make it even more powerful.
Join me, Jeremy Swick, on Into the Unknown, a podcast that delves into the personal journeys, stories, and experiences of individuals across diverse professions. As a historian by trade, I firmly believe that our personal histories shape our present and offer valuable insights into our paths ahead. With that being said, let's get into it. One thing you also mentioned, we talked about a little bit earlier, and I think it's really important to make sure, whether you're a host or how you're working on podcasts, is to have people in your corner that really know what they're doing. For example, you mentioned auditing podcasts. I actually had you audit my podcast, and I can't remember. I was probably about 60, 70 episodes in, and it was one of those things where helping kind of ideas or areas I wasn't 100% sure on. And I think a lot of times when you're working on your own stuff, you're almost more focused on that than you are the SEO optimization and other things. But then I was also able to bring that to my clients of seeing what I saw, how you did it as well.
Yeah, and it's one of those things too, like you mentioned, sometimes when you're so close to something and you're so passionate, you don't necessarily know how to move in the best direction. And one thing I tell people is everything, I'm someone who loves to learn. And when I'm passionate about something, I go 120% down the rabbit hole, full throttle, like how fast can we learn everything I could possibly learn? And so when I decided like, hey, I might want to start a podcast, because that's how I started and ended up starting my business. I did every informational interview I could possibly get with the best in the industry. I did everything. I learned every inch. Now, the benefit I also had was I have a degree or certification in every business area. I understand code. I understand all these different moving pieces. I also have worked in corporate and professional sports. So I dealt with media. I saw how things did for 8 years in professional sports. I was very up close and personal. So I saw the media side of things for a very long time. I understand the business side. So for me, I went down that deep rabbit hole and learned and talked to people and was able to have conversations a lot of hosts don't, and cut through all the white noise, all the noise that's there, because there's a lot of noise in the industry, and then bring that to my clients and say, hey, listen, like this is the experience I've had in podcasting. From launching my episode day one, within 30 days, I was in 8 countries. This is how I did it. This is what we're going to do for you, based on what you're saying. And they see results where they're like, oh, crap. I posted this to social media like you told me to. And because of the coding that you did, or, the titles, descriptions, and the strategy, you and I worked together. We're 2 episodes in and I'm in 4 countries and I'm not even promoting it everywhere yet. Like, how is this happening? I'm like, exactly. Right. And the way I show up for my clients is I'm always having my finger on the pulse. What is someone doing in the industry now? What are the trends that are working? What is fading out? Because that's the other aspect. Things might be changing. I remember when Spotify got bought out, I think it was around the time we were talking and I was doing your audit, or before then, and it was Anchor at the time, and I'm reading code and I'm like, something is off. I'm like, something's happening. I can't completely figure it out, but there's something going on here. And I had a conversation. I was like, right now the platform seems still to be awesome, but we need to be aware of this is going on, because I could see it. And so when people were asking me afterwards, I was like, something's happening with Anchor. I don't know if it's going to be the best platform. There's change coming. Can't tell, like, I can't put my finger on it. Change is coming. And within 6 months, Spotify bought them out. And I was like, oh, that's what was happening, right? And so it's understanding and saying you might know everything, but you need to keep still keeping your finger on the pulse. And then it's also when I work with clients from a host or guest perspective, it's this is what is working, and here's the proof, and I could show you it's working because every one of my clients, you're a top globally ranked podcast now. Every single one of my clients have become top globally ranked podcasts within a year of us working together. Whether they start with me from day one and never having a podcast before and saying, hey, I have this idea. I want to start my podcast. And within the month, can we do it? The quickest turnaround I've done, fun fact, is 2 weeks. That was a little bit of stressor because it was also right before, like, literally they signed right before Thanksgiving, and they were like, the first week of December we want to launch. And I'm like, oh, okay, holidays, great, everyone's taking like 4 days off, like next week. Okay, let's see how this goes. So, or starting then, or starting with a podcast and being like, hey, I know I am having good conversation, I know I'm making this impact, but I want to make it even more powerful. How do I do that?
I think it's so important, as you mentioned, seeing what, seeing what you do see, but also I tell a lot of my clients, like, and I think we're in the same boat, same position. It's like this will work, whether you listen to me or not. I just want you to know this is what I'm seeing. And sometimes, sometimes it's tough conversations, and sometimes clients want to hear it. Sometimes they don't want to hear it. But I'm like, here's the blueprint. We have a blueprint. We have these shows rising and rising, and I'm giving them the same kind of feedback that I'm giving you. And sometimes it's a podcast that's more successful or less successful. It's one of those things. I think it's important as a host of a podcast to always be open to that feedback, especially when you hire someone to help you. It's one thing if I'm just, a random person off the street giving my feedback, which, sometimes I would ignore. Every bit has maybe a grain of truth, but it's one of those things I always encourage my clients and those that are looking for someone to help them with their podcast. Make sure whoever you're working with is actually giving you feedback as well, telling them what they see and what they think you can improve on, or areas they think that are successful. I think it's so important. And as you mentioned, it gets tough with a lot of those, I guess you could call them big box producers and things like that, where it all comes out the same. Sometimes I've talked to clients, you never hear from them again. Of course, your episodes get delivered and all that, but there's no real give and take. There's no real feedback in those kind of experiences.
Oh, 100%. And it's also, sometimes I get pushed back in initial calls, and I could immediately, I'm like, okay, you don't want to listen to any of this? Come back to me in 10 episodes. Oh, wait, you don't have a podcast anymore. Oh, okay. And I'm not trying to be like sassy about it, but that's what ends up happening. I remember there was one individual I did a turnaround. He had been wanting to start a podcast for over a year. He had over 100 episodes recorded, only like 5 edited. He knew what he wanted to talk about, but didn't have a podcast name, didn't have artwork, had nothing else set up. And I was introduced to him through someone else I knew, and they like met for coffee, and they're literally at the coffee shop. And I get a call. She's from this woman, and she was like, "Hey, I'm with this person, blah blah blah." Like, gave me the rundown. She's like, "You guys need to sign," and he signs. And I very much, like, we have a very honest conversation that I do with anyone I network with, whether we work together or not, whatever it might be. I have very transparent conversations. We had that conversation. He paid his invoice literally right then and there while we were on the phone. And within a month, we had his podcast up. We had 4 episodes like set to release. And one important thing too, I say for any entrepreneur in general, anyone who's hiring anyone to do anything, understand your finances before you sign up and have those conversations. And so we get towards the end of the month, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to be sending you your next invoice. And he was like, oh, Olivia, that price, no longer fits. And I was like, wait, you knew this was we talked a 12-month contract. What do you mean, like, nothing fits? And so we had a conversation, and what he wanted me to do for the price he wanted me to do, I was not comfortable doing. And I knew it wasn't going to work out well. And it was also like not fair to me. He basically wanted me to charge him a third of the price and literally train his team on every piece of knowledge I have about the industry so that they could then go and do it. And he's a salesperson. So, like, in my head, too, I'm thinking, so you're going to get all my intellectual property. And then knowing this individual, you're potentially going to try to go sell it as something. That's not appropriate. Like, that's not cool. You could bring me in-house. Like, I could be white labeled. And he didn't want that. So I said, okay, at this time, like, what I offer versus what you're looking for is not in alignment. So that's fine. Like, wish you best of luck. Like, please continue with your podcast. And so I let go for, like 2-3 months. And we were on a text basis. And like one day I was like, I'm going to look up his podcast. Look it up. Not one episode had been published from the day I scheduled his last episode. So then I reach out to him. I'm like, hey, what's going on? Like, I just checked your podcast. Why is nothing released? Oh, I haven't had time, this and that. And I was like, you could do this. Like, what is going on? You already have the content recorded. And like, we had a conversation. And then he was like, okay, I'm going to have my team work on it. 3 months go by and I'm like, I haven't heard from him. Let me check this. Again, nothing. And I'm like, texting him again. I'm like, come on, what is going on? Why? I shouldn't want your podcast to succeed more than you do. Like, come on, you have the episodes. Let's work together. I could help you with this. And kind of was like, well, I have an in-house team, this and that. And like, this was, we stopped working together in November. In like July, I like pulled it up again. Still not. One episode had been published, like randomly, which as a podcaster and someone who works in the industry, that won't do shit for you. I mean, tell you right now, guys, and like, I'll scream it from the mountaintops. If you randomly upload episodes and don't have a strategy and it's a one random, like anything, even if it's constantly like randomly you upload an episode once a month, that can actually hurt you more than it will help you. And then you're going to get upset that why isn't that doing well? And like, you're going to go down the rabbit hole. So I like reached out to him. I'm like, what's going on? He's like, oh, we've been releasing them on YouTube. And I'm like, why aren't you releasing them on your audio platforms though? Like, you have this whole thing. And like, we ended up going back and forth. And like, he said to me, he's like, I appreciate you like wanting my show to succeed. Like, I haven't thought about all these other aspects. And he's someone that now, a year later, has come back to me a few times wanting different things and being like, hey, can we work together on this? Or, can you give me advice on how to have this conversation? Or I think I might need, like, now the conversation is bringing me back in and starting so that the podcast is consistent and like actually releasing the way he wanted it to release and perform the way he wanted to. But you will see that a lot of times. Podcasters who start and lose momentum or just really don't want the advice and think, like, I hate to say it, there's people out there, it doesn't matter if it's podcasting, it could be something else, that they know all the information. But unless they can prove that it works, a lot of times it sinks to the bottom of the ocean. And then you look back and you're like, yeah, that really was going to work. Thank you for, telling me, someone who's been in the industry for so long, that I am 100% wrong. And look at the results we got.
Olivia, I appreciate you mentioning that. And I tell people who are either launching businesses, and of course, I get it when you first start. I mean, I know I said yes to crazy things that they were so low financially paying that I don't know why. I scratch my head still sometimes why I did it. Of course, hindsight, it's for that experience. But I think so much of it is now being comfortable now being comfortable charging what you do and also having now the results to back it up. It's not like we're not a discount bargain bin here. You're actually paying for your expertise. You're paying for your experience. I wouldn't even say paying for your network, because there's still people that, depending on where I see us fitting, maybe we don't always introduce each other to, or not each other, but excuse me, we don't always introduce our clients to maybe someone who wouldn't be a good fit, or it wouldn't make sense to have them on the show. But I think so much of that is really just being comfortable with who you are, who your business is, and who your business caters to is important.
Well, and that's the thing too. I've had producer like build relationships with different producers like yourself, and then like some will come to me like angry 3 months later. Like you have people who are starting podcasts. Why aren't you giving me any of them? And I'm like, hold up. There are times that they come and they already have a few episodes recorded, or they want to do it in person, and you're not an in-person studio, which we could go down a whole rabbit hole on how I actually feel about in-person recordings, but that's a different conversation. But I'm like, there are certain things that play into it. Like I cannot control everything. Or a lot of times it's hosts who've already started, even if they're 3 episodes in. They already looked for everyone else. They knew what they needed. Sometimes it's their producer reaching out to me and going, hey, this person needs support. I need you to support this person. Like, or a producer brought them on and said, I've had producers literally reach out to me. And I remember the first time this happened, I did not know this producer at all. Didn't know him from a hole in the wall. He had heard of me and this and that. And he signed a client, and one of the stipulations was they had to hire me. Because he was like, I could see the writing on the wall. They're going to need support. I do podcast producing and editing. That's all I do. So I told them if they want to start a podcast and they want to work with me, they have to work with you. And I was like, I literally don't know this person. Right. So it's like meeting people where they are. But a lot of times, what I can do for a host, in I keep all these things in my head of like, what is that guest looking for? What are potential ways they can work together, even if it isn't cookie cutter, like here's the vision, here's the things I'm going to introduce you. Because a lot of times, as we've mentioned in this discussion, opportunities can come up when you're talking, when you're collaborating, whether it is in the recording, before the recording, or after. Opportunities can arise, or they might introduce you to someone. So whenever I try, whenever I match a host and a guest, to also keep in the back of my mind, are they going to be able to network together, collaborate, refer to each other? Like, what could that potentially look like for both of them? Because at the end of the day, a lot of us entrepreneurs that are doing a podcast, yeah, we do it because we want to, raise voices, elevate people, tell stories, and all these different things, right? But there is a level of it where, like I started my podcast first. Then I immediately started my business the same day of my podcast launch. My original consulting division of my business was career development consulting. Within 2 months, that pivoted to podcast consulting because everyone was coming to me for podcast questions. How did I have success right away? All these things. So I quickly pivoted because I was like, oh, this is what you want from me. You don't want my career consulting. You want on my podcast. You want help with this space. I've been doing it ever since. But it's understanding like where people are, what they can actually do.
I think it is so important meeting people where they are. It's funny because in my experience, I actually had podcast clients before I launched my own, and I'm trying to explain what to do, and I'm like, no, do it like this. And it got to the point where I'm like, okay, well, let me just launch it. Let me launch my own. I asked 30 of my dream guests, in quotes, if you can't see, within my network. So no one shooting for the moon. We're not asking Barack Obama on the podcast because we don't know Barack Obama. That being said, we do have some NFL connections. We do have some professional sports connections, and different areas of that. So I asked 30 people. Of course, to my surprise, but also my luck, all 30 said yes, and it was like really off to the races from there. But it's one of those things where I think it's so important to meet people where they're at and just kind of see where you can help them grow, whether and determine if it is right fit or not.
And that's the important thing. It has to be a right fit. And in business, whether it's podcast, like I got an email today from someone. I was like, okay, I'll have a conversation with you about potentially being a guest on my podcast. And I forget what was said, and they emailed me back and they're like, okay, here's my guest fee. And I was like, and it was $299 for me to pay them to be a guest on my podcast. And I was like, yeah, you really don't understand, do you? And there are podcasters who pay those. I do get people who come to me and consult, like people are, I pay some guests, blah, blah. And I'm like, why are you paying a guest? And there are different reasons, but I've never, in this instance, I was very nice about it, but like being quite frank, I was like, I am a top 5% most listened to podcast globally since week 40, since week 17, 18 to 19. In between those two episodes dropping, I became a top 10. I am in 50 plus countries and the only podcast in all 7 continents. I'm a TEDx speaker. Like, I got all these connections that I might be able to give to you, and you're asking me to pay you $300 to come on my podcast when once a month I have a celebrity and professional athlete that I don't pay. And I was like, we're really missing the mark here. And so it's understanding how, I say that because it's understanding how both sides can fit and work together, and the value that each person brings to the table. We have to all understand it's a business as well, right? So when you have a podcast as an entrepreneur, how can you feed the pipeline? Is it by, building that audience and adding value through solo episodes? And like, in all reality, it can change over time. Your strategy can change over time. Is it by putting offers? I know Jeremy, like if you want to learn about Jeremy's services, in every podcast description, there's a link to connect with him in many different ways. If it's my services, I do the same thing. If it's an offer, it might be talked about. And there's ways to feed your pipeline and look at the benefits of podcasting. Same with all my guests. Every single one of my guests, and I know Jeremy's too, has their contact information in the description. The value is, all of that is lead generation, guys. Let's talk a second about lead generation and what lead generation actually means. Because I'm not going to lie, when I started business and people be like, I'll get you lead generation, I'll help you. And I'm like, okay, well, first of all, like, there's some in it and some speculation. No joke, though. For like the first 2.5 years of my business, someone would tell me lead generation. I'm like, the proof isn't in the pudding. Like, we'd have conversation. I'm like, okay, well, what results? And they'll be like, oh, well, and I'm like, they can't be like, hey, this is really what it looks like, or this and that. So to a lot of entrepreneurs, lead generation means conversions to sales. That is not what lead generation is. And I think that gets, like, over time and networking and all these stuff, we confuse lead generation with conversions. And I think it's really important to, and like now I've gone on to talk about this, but it is really important to say, what are the different ways and what are the different pipelines I'm lead generating through? Because there should always be about 6 that you're leveraging. Podcast is a very powerful one. If you're a host, your returning audiences, they're all lead generations. You never know when they might reach out to you. Those are people you're touching that if you didn't have a podcast, you would not be touching. From a guest perspective, for example, I'll say me. I'm on your podcast. Your audience is an audience. Granted, I've been a guest before, but like they are getting another touch point with me. That is all. Every person who listens to this episode is lead generation, because they might have not known me from a hole in a wall unless they listened to the previous episode. That is lead generation. Then once they talk to you, let's say there's 1,000 people and 10 end up reaching out to me. That's 10 people that might convert to clients. But you would have never gotten those 10 people, and I'll say me, I might have never gotten those 10 people if we weren't having this conversation. So it's understanding how to fill that pipeline through podcasting as well that is very important.
Olivia, I couldn't agree more. And, as we wrap up this conversation, which went a little longer than I anticipated, but, it's one of those things where when you're both really passionate about a topic, I think it's exciting. It doesn't feel like it's almost been an hour of us, riffing back and forth. But it's one of those things where I think when you're passionate, and if you're a podcaster or aspiring podcaster, having those people in your corner that support you, that want to work with you, and you want to work with them as well is super important because the whole kind of conversation we've had, so much of it is networking and collaborating. We talk all the time, and you can bet if there's someone who I think might benefit from talking with you or working with you, I always send them your way, and I think it's vice versa. So it's one of those things where when you're looking for a potential person to work with for your podcast, it's important to kind of see and ask those important questions of who they've worked with and kind of seeing what their experience is as well.
Well, and that's the thing. And as you were saying that, it even reminded me. There's been times I remember, what was it, when I was getting ready to move, because my boyfriend is a chief in the U.S. Coast Guard, from Florida to Juneau, Alaska. I knew, again, always have those batch recordings, but I didn't know exactly when, like, we would get all of our stuff from Florida to Juneau because the military moves you. And so I was really diligent on prepping, like extra prep. And I'm like looking at my time, like my blocks of time and my schedule. And I, like, one day it dawns on me and I'm like, oh, wow, I need two more current or former pro athletes or celebrities. And I literally text Jeremy and I'm like, hey, I know you have these kinds of guests on your show too. Um, I just realized, like, I don't have these two spots filled. Is there anyone you had really good conversation with that you would do an introduction? You immediately, like, was like, yeah, here, I'll do these today for you. And I got both of those individuals on my podcast as well. And it's like those moments, whether it's like, hey, I need this. We were having a conversation recently and I was like, hey, what's going on? And you were telling me your goals and like what was remaining to fill. And I was like, I might not have them as clients, but like give me a week, 2 weeks, and I'll be a guest for you because I definitely wanted to be back on this podcast because I enjoyed it so much last time. I was like, oh, here's my opportunity. I get to bring it back up. But I was like, oh, let me go through my Rolodex, see something that's unique, reach out to them, hear from them, and then do an introduction. So it's like it isn't always about collaborating in just professional senses, and that's why I tell you this story. It's also about collaborating and being there for people in your community doing what we all love. Because yeah, it's been almost an hour, and not gonna lie, we said this was gonna be shorter, so I actually have a block. I luckily texted my producer right before this saying, hey, I might be late to our recording because I was thinking I'm recording a solo episodes, a few of them today. And he was like, okay, fine. And we're past that. And I was like, oh, no problem. Like, it didn't even dawn on me. And until you said it, and I was like, oh yeah, we're far behind. But like when you love what you do and it is passionate about and you're in your zone of genius, like you and I both are, the time literally flies, and I could be talking about this and going down so many different rabbit holes with you.
Olivia, I couldn't agree more. And it's one of those things when you build relationships, professional and personal, you reach out and you're like, hey, I need two. And of course, I tell people, clients, this potential clients, sorry, I'm not going to give you my Olympian friends every day. But when you said what you needed, I was, oh yeah, say less. I will text him. I'll give him a call right now. We'll make sure we'll get this going and make sure we can, push him your way, just because again, it's that relationship capital of making those deposits, helping me when I needed help, helping you when you needed help. I think it's one of those things. It's really one of those really cool things about podcasting.
Couldn't agree more.
As we close out, if people want to work with you or learn more about what you do, where can they find you? What's your podcast called? And we'll call it a day after that.
So my podcast, as you might see if you're watching this, and my backdrop is called Achieving Success with Olivia Atkin. I am on YouTube, so you can watch it on YouTube, or I am on literally every single audio platform. So if you just search Achieving Success with Olivia Atkin, you can find it anywhere you listen to podcasts. as well as if you search Achieving Success or Achieving Success with Olivia Atkin in Google, I'm like the first 5 pages of Google, so you'll find everything you possibly might want. But you can also reach out to me via email at olivia.atkin@achieving-success.com. I do answer every single email, and I go through every single email. So I just say sometimes if you email me on a Friday, you're not going to potentially get a response till Monday. So because I do personally go through everything, you can reach out to me on socials, Olivia Atkin, on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram under that, as well as Achieving Success on Instagram, Facebook. We have a Facebook community page for podcasters that recently just released. We're on LinkedIn as Achieving Success. Literally, always feel free to reach out anyway. My website, achieving-success.com. I answer all of them, guys.
Well, Olivia, thanks again for taking time to talk with me today. I really do appreciate it. We'll talk soon. That was another fun episode of Into the Unknown. I truly appreciate you taking the time to listen. And if it provides you any value or entertainment, I would love if you shared it with others, liked, subscribed, and really just help the podcast grow. Again, tell a friend, tell a foe, just anyone who might enjoy hearing some stories of people's own journeys and what got them to where they are today. Till next time.